Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to finish up activity 3, which we're covering importing and exporting data with R. So picking up where we left off, we're just going to talk a little bit about options when you're working with data that's in this special type of format that maybe R doesn't directly play with nicely. So believe it or not, not everyone uses the programming language R. Sometimes you might be collaborating with others who use a different type of programming language or other statistical software tool. And with those tools or other programs, sometimes there are special data file types associated with those programs. And so there's not great functions in base R, sort of R out of the box, for handling those types of data sets. So for example, SAS, SPSS data, Excel, and MATLAB all have their own proprietary data file types. So you may be familiar with like Excel, which are .xls or .xlsx files. But then these other languages have their own files as well. Like SAS has their own proprietary data file types. SPSS does, and they commonly end with the file extension .sav. Stata does, I believe their file extensions end in .dat, and so on. So this can be a pain to work with because maybe you're given a data set, but again, R can't directly import it right away. I had this case with MATLAB. I collaborated with someone who worked in MATLAB once and needed to analyze a MATLAB data file. So what are our options here? If you're able to use that other software tool or programming language, you could export data from that to a CSV file or something that's easier to work with and import into R. Some cons with this, you may not be able to do that. You might not have access to that software if it costs money. You might not know how to program in that language or use that software tool. And it may take extra time, even if you do know how to do it. Other downsides, there can be some information loss potentially by exporting a data file to something like a CSV, which is handles very basic tabular data with rows and columns. There might be additional, more hierarchical information that is lost when exporting data to a table format, tabular format. Okay. So some packages that have addressed this issue and tried to help our users out. One of the first packages that has a lot of great options for many different types of data sets is the foreign package. Okay. So the foreign package has sort of a variety of tools for reading from different softwares and programming languages. Some packages have been written specifically for other programming languages. So read Stata 13 was specifically for reading Stata files. SAS 7BDAT was specifically created for trying to work with SAS data sets. And then R MATLAB is for people working in R trying to work with MATLAB data sets. The Haven package, similar to the foreign package, provides sort of like a suite of different tools for reading from different softwares or programming languages. And Haven is part of the Tidyverse collection of packages and was created by Hadley Wickham. Okay, so we're not going to implement any of these functions in RStudio today with this activity, but we're just sort of going to look at them and acknowledge their existence in case you ever need to use these functions. Okay. So read.dta from the foreign package for Stata files. Stata is a programming language common in the economics community. EpiInfo is a proprietary statistical analysis software created by the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. So there's a function for importing data from that. Minitab is a very old version of SPSS or Excel type thing. So it's very clickable, was very common a few decades ago, but not hardly used today, although you may still encounter these types of data files. Octave is an open source alternative to MATLAB. I honestly hadn't heard of this before, so I had to Google what this was. SPSS, again, sort of similar to Excel in terms of how this works, but it's a statistical software tool owned by IBM that is fairly commonly used. Systat is a software tool I'm not as familiar with, but there's functions for reading from that. And then SAS, the foreign package, has functions for reading from SAS. However, if you're importing from a SAS file or a Stata file or SPSS, I would recommend using the Haven package in general. Hadley has tried to make this as seamless as possible for you and uses a consistent format in terms of the structure of the functions and how we call them when importing data from these different types. Also, what's nice about the Haven package is that there's functions for importing data sets from these proprietary file types, but there's also write functions for exporting data to these proprietary file types. So helpful if you have a collaborator who wants some analysis done on a data set, gives it to you as a SAS data set, for example, wants you to run the analysis in R, but then give it back to them as a SAS data set. Okay, you can do that entirely in R with this Haven package without ever having to open SAS or even having SAS installed. Okay. So that's a great package. Lastly, one that you'll likely use at some point if you use R for your job is the Read Excel package, which is also a part of the tidyverse. So this has some nice functions for reading directly from Excel files, .xlsx or .xls files. Excel files are very common, right? Similar to CSVs, but you can't use read.csv to read in these types of files. So there's this specialty package to help you out with that. And there's also write functions as well for exporting data to .xls files. Okay. So that's it for activity 3. We'll take a look here in our studio one last time, knit this file, and I'll show what activity 3, the output, should look like roughly. Okay. All right. So here's roughly what our package should look like, our output, sorry, should look like, where we've just learned a little bit about importing and exporting data with R. Okay. All right. So make sure to submit this via Blackboard, and please email me or ask if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help.